This is The Civil Fleet, the podcast focused on activist-led refugee rescue and support missions across Fortress Europe, with me, Ben Cowles. In today's episode, we speak with filmmaker Sonita Gale about her award-winning documentary film, Hostile. Sonita tells us how Britain's hostile environment stretches way further back than 2012, when Theresa May, the then Home Secretary, coined the term, and is in fact rooted back in the days of the British Empire. We hear how successive governments, both Labour and Conservative, have created an inhumane system for migrants and refugees in the UK. And we also talk about how these policies have affected the people in her film. Sonita also tells us how these dehumanising policies have led to the so-called Windrush scandal, and how they link with the crises in the NHS, with workers' rights, with poverty, and the government's crackdown on protests. As always, before we get into today's show, I'd like to remind you that the Civil Fleet is not just a podcast, it's also a website with news stories, interviews, and investigative reports. So go to civilfleet.com to find out more. Also, if you like what we're doing and you would like to help us to continue to platform the activists, refugees, lawyers, journalists and filmmakers that we have had on here, then please consider supporting us with a small donation, or if you're feeling really generous, give us tons of money. We don't really need it, but you can go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet to do that. That's ko-fi.com/civilfleet. Any help you can give us will be greatly appreciated. Right, and the last thing before we get into today's episode, I know it's been a long time since I've put out an episode. It's been about a month. Sorry about that. I've got some more interviews lined up, so we should have some more regular podcasts coming out next month and the month after that, hopefully. Been really busy in and out of work, and life gets in the way, doesn't it? But hopefully, like I said, we've got some more stuff lined up, and there's going to be some more regular episodes, I hope. Anyway, do give us a share, give us a rating, and all that good stuff. And write us a review if you like. That would be really helpful. Right, enough of this crap. Let's get on with the episode. So, Sonita, shall we get started?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sonita Gale, thank you so much for coming on the Civil Fleet podcast.
You're welcome.
So we've got you on today, to talk about the hostile environment and your film, your documentary film called Hostile, which is fantastic. Everyone should go and watch it. We're going to talk about that today. But before we get started, Sonita, could you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, a bit of your background, and how you ended up becoming a documentary filmmaker?
Yeah, sure. So I'm nearly 48 years old. I'm a mum of two. I live in London, and I come from a large family, a large Indian Sikh family, and I guess we grew up in a very Indian and diverse, multicultural environment in the West Midlands, and that's where my parents came to after the partition of India and Pakistan. So my parents came here really as refugees from their own country, forced really out of the country because of displacement. My mum lived in Lahore, and I think travelling from Lahore to the Punjab, which was around 16 days by foot, and residing in a place of the Punjab which was so unfamiliar to her, I guess at that point she kind of felt that, it wasn't really her home after what happened with partition. So, my family came here in the early 50s, and they lived here all their lives, and they had children. I'm one of 10. I have several cousins, aunties, uncles, second cousins. I have quite a wide, extended family. So, and I have my family in London now. So I guess my history really is a history of migration. And I came to filmmaking really in my 40s. I was educated in London. I went to university. I studied psychology. Filmmaking wasn't really in my path. I guess as a young person, it wasn't something that was presented to me. The arts was, drawing, and I loved reading, I loved writing, but not really filmmaking. And I guess after having my children, I had a few things I wanted to say, things that probably I suppressed for many years, and things that really didn't come to the forefront as much as they could have done in my adult life. And I guess filmmaking has given me the opportunity to express those things that really I feel passionately about. And one thing that I've always felt really passionately about is my history and migration and immigration. And I guess that's why I made my debut film, Hostile.
It's an amazing film. It's so... I was watching it, I just watched it like 2-3 days ago, and it was really dense. I was surprised on how many themes the film touches on. You've got like, I've got some notes here, you've got like, it touches on COVID and the NHS crisis, on workers' rights, Black Lives Matter, colonialism, poverty, the cost of living, workers' rights, and even the police, the recent police crime and sentencing bill and all that kind of stuff. It's just really dense, and it's great that you've tied all this stuff in together. I guess before we start talking about the film and about the hostile environment, could you just explain to our listeners what kind of give a brief overview of what the hostile environment is? I mean, I guess that's what your whole film's about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the hostile environment is a web of policies. It's a set of policies. It's a number of things really put in place by not only the Conservative government, the Liberal government, the Labour government, over many, many years and decades that have got us to this critical point of history. They're just assemblies of policies, legislation, law, acts of Parliament that have been put together and almost hashed together in a response to what is happening at that moment in our time, in our history, and also a response to voting. And the hostile environment is extremely dangerous because those policies not only affect people that are living here lawfully and legally, they affect people that are coming here who are effectively, leaving their country because of persecution, war, poverty, climate crisis. So the hostile environment really is a set of policies that attacks individuals. It's a set of policies that undermines individuals, and it's a set of policies that really affect the mental health of individuals. And I guess it's very difficult to map out and to pinpoint and to blame, because I think the hostile environment is all encompassing, and it involves a lot of people. It involves a lot of ideas from different parties, and it involves a lot of orchestration, and a lot of it is bad. And I think that's really what the hostile environment is,
Absolutely, yeah, and it's not like you said. It's not just the governments have never had a hostile environment act or bill or anything, right? It's like a collection of different legislation and laws that have come into force. I like that you in the film you kind of go back to like Enoch Powell, and you go back to like the various different immigration acts. There was one that kind of I've always known this, but I was born in the States. My dad's American, my mum's British, and the only reason I have a British citizenship is because my mum was British, and that came into effect in the 1971 Immigration Act. And that affects, like, if I had children outside of the country, then they don't get British citizenship. But yeah, I thought it was amazing how you kind of the film, it kind of goes back to all that, and it's not just Theresa May who like in 2012 was it? She talked about creating a hostile environment. They've never actually made that an act or a bill. It's a set of policies that have been made for a long time now, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I was going to say Theresa May earlier, but you can see in my film that I didn't put her in my film, because Theresa May was then Home Secretary for David Cameron, and I think under his guidance as Conservative leader, a lot of this was enforced during his time, and I think also during the time of Tony Blair and New Labour. I mean, we didn't have this no recourse to public funds policy until we had that policy put forward by the New Labour government. So yes, Theresa May did coin the terminology hostile environment, but there has been a history, and as you say, Enoch Powell and that very famous Rivers of Blood speech, which is in my film, and as I show and reflect that actually, this is happening now, and that's why you see Boris Johnson, not really understanding the hostile environment and no recourse to public funds in the film. But then I kind of started questioning at that point, why do we have a hostile environment? You know, we can't say it's just come about in 2012. We can't point our finger to that Home Secretary at that time. And that's why I wanted to go back. That's why my research took me to the 1971 Act, to the 1968 Act, the 1948 Act. And it was like kind of those acts that kind of led us to where we are today. But then if you go further back and you look at sort of post-war immigration, you look at the building of the NHS and all of that, and then Clement Attlee, at that time we had racist rhetoric. And then you go further back and you look at empire and colonization and slavery and the impact of all of that that's had on communities and society and the country and Europe and even the world. And you think that this is just a sort of like accumulating, it's just the momentum that builds these hostile environments. And I guess, you know, if we manifest this bigger, which is dangerous in a way, but it is what's happening, hostile environments exist beyond law and legislation and policy, beyond the paperwork that you see in my film. It exists within organizations. It exists within communities. It exists within policy. It exists within all sorts of different parts of life. And I think that's the worrying thing about the hostile environment, is that once it happens in one area, it can so easily happen in other areas of our life. And I think there is an expansion that's happening now, this notion that, oh, it doesn't really matter, you know, the underdog, the person over there, you know, the migrant, the person coming here via the boat, the poor person, the working class person, the one that's relying on benefits, you know, the one that's, it's like attacking those that are underprivileged, under-resourced, and those that are deemed disposable. And that's the sickening thing about the hostile environment generically. It really does target those people that are deemed disposable. And it's very threatening, and it's concerning and worrying. And I think there is fear right now, but I also feel that there is progress. And I'm focusing on the progress aspect of things right now, because if we focus on the fear that we are being faced with around these hostile environments, there will never be progress. And that's where we need to head towards.
Mm-hmm. That's like one of the things with this podcast. And I was talking to someone about it the other day, and like I was like, God, I'm always talking about depressing subjects in my podcast, but I hope that it, you know, one of the reasons I always ask people to tell us about their background is I want other people to realize that, you know, anyone can do stuff to get involved, to fight against all of this stuff. It doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to head towards the dystopia I feel like we're going towards sometimes, right? And you just mentioned actually that there or a bit before maybe, no recourse to public funds. So my understanding of that is if you're a migrant or if you're deemed to have no access to public funds, that means you can't get any, you know, benefit support. You can't get support with housing, childcare, nothing. Even the NHS, you have to pay for it, right? And I think one of your characters in this film, one of the people, the subjects of your film, is his name Farouk?
Yes.
Yeah. He was born. Well, maybe you could tell us a bit about his situation, and how that's affected him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like you say about no recourse to public funds, which was something I didn't know about until I made Hostile, and I didn't realise that no recourse to public funds is part of this hostile environment. And so you're rightly say the no recourse to public funds really does. It stops people from accessing the disability allowance, universal credit, in the past free school meals, accessing the NHS. You know, that there are different services that you believe that are just readily available to absolutely everybody in this country. And I think that's the thing about the hostile environment, is that people think, and they have this impression that when people are coming here, they're coming here to take from our system. Well, actually the opposite's happening. And in the case of Farouk, he was here for many years. He came here as an international student. He studied at Manchester University, got his degree. He wanted to work with technology and computers and technical support, and he went down that route. And when I met Farouk, he was working for the NHS, frontline, supporting systems, NHS systems. And I think that with Farouk, he was subject to the hostile environment because this is a person that was here lawfully, legally, paying his taxes, had no recourse to public funds. So when the pandemic happened, everything was shut off for him. no income, no recourse to public funds. How do you survive in a situation like that when you cannot rely on any government, allowances? When you're not able to get universal credits, if you cannot get a free school meal, if you cannot get it's like, how do you, like he says in the film, how do you pay for your bills? How do you buy nappies? How do you feed your children? So all of these years he's been paying his taxes and working in the NHS. When his time comes where he needs us, that support isn't there. That safety net is gone. And that is happening for a lot of people in our country, where that safety net is just not there. So in the case of Farouk, he couldn't work. He struggled a lot. Meanwhile, he's having to pay for his applications. Meanwhile, he's having to deal with his own mental health crisis. Meanwhile, he's having to deal with his health crisis. Unfortunately, Farouk did get cancer during this whole time. He also got a significant amount of debt because of it, and he's still paying off that debt. And I think Farouk is one of the participants in our film that I really felt that his situation was so terribly handled by the Home Office that actually it showed to me that this Home Office is very removed from the day-to-day human lives of people that are suffering, because it is a machine. It is very computerized. It is what you put in, it spits out. It doesn't have that touchy-feely aspect to it. There are no Home Office cafes. There is no person you can call up and speak to about your case number. There is no one individual that's got your back. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of contacting. It's a lot of postage, printing and postage. And you're sending it off in its bundles, and you don't even know whether you're going to hear back or not. And when you do hear back, you don't even know what the response is going to be. And when the response isn't good, you then have to go through that process again and again and again to try and turn that around to your benefit. And that is really difficult, for a lot of people, because first of all, in Farouk's case, even though he came from Pakistan, he was able to speak, read and write English. So he was able to fill in these applications. But you imagine if that was a person where English isn't their, a language that they understand, where they cannot read and write, and they are in this country and they are really struggling and trying to find their way, and there's absolutely no safety net whatsoever. So it kind of made me really think about my own mom. When I was growing up, I had a single parent. My father died when I was 5 years old. So on a Friday night, the man from the Peru used to come over with his book, and my mom said, "This is our future." And every week she'd put £10 in that pot. When you're older, I want to be able to provide for you. And she would get applications and things to fill in, and she would have to respond to certain things, whether it's to do with our schooling or medical or whatever. She couldn't read or write English. So a lot of that came on us as her children. And we helped her through that process. And I kind of look back on those years and think, what an incredible woman that she got through all of that with 10 children as almost a single parent for most of my life anyway, and got us through that. And actually, without having us as her children and being her support, who would have been there for her? So, this is why this film was so important to me, particularly as a daughter of a migrant, and was so important to me to get out there to show others that they're not alone, And in the case of Farouk, I've had so many people contact me, whether it's family of people that are affected, whether it's people that are affected, whether it's lawyers who are representing people that are affected, whether it's MPs that are representing constituents who are affected. It goes on and on and on. And it is all about spreading the word, raising awareness, and kind of coming together so that we can build a better society for all. And that's where I'm heading now. That's where I want to be. And even though we are in a very troubled time right now, where migration is at the top of their agenda. Every day you cannot turn the page in the paper without seeing an article on migration. I feel like something has to come out of this where the narrative will change in the future.
I hope so, yeah. But I mean, even today, we're recording on the 26th of May. I think the main story in a lot of the papers and on the TV news and stuff is the latest immigration figures, and they're higher than ever. Or it's just the framing of the situation is always negative, right? And it's so frustrating. Another thing in your film, I mean, there were so much things you said there. Like, I feel like I go off in about a million different directions there. But I really wanted to talk about Anthony, who's in your film. So he's part of the Windrush generation, right? For anyone who's listening, we have quite a few listeners of this podcast abroad. So I wondered if you could kind of just give us a quick sort of part history of the Windrush, the Empire Windrush ship that brought people from Jamaica, and what happened to Anthony, who's another subject in your film.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Windrush generation came post Second World War. There was a need really at that time for us to build our NHS, to build our country again. And immigration was at the top of our agenda. And it was a positive thing that people came here to embed themselves in our society, to bring their culture to our society, and to integrate, which is why we love Great Britain, for that integration. And they came here, and a lot of them worked within the NHS. A lot of them worked within manual work and bringing their skills to the labour shortage that we had. So the Windrush generation came during that time, and some of them came on the Windrush, the Empire Windrush boat, but some of them came in other ways. And I guess I think around over 500,000 migrants living in the UK right now came during that time. So it was quite a significant number of people that came over. So the unfortunate thing about the Windrush generation is when they came here, when they worked here, when they embedded themselves into society, they came with their passports. They came on an understanding that it was an unwritten rule that they would get their indefinite leave to remain, that they would get their entitlement to be here legally and lawfully. So they're living here, happily, having a good life, working, having families. And then around 2012, 2013, we start hearing the rumblings of the hostile environment. We start seeing that things are starting to change. People are starting to talk about illegal migration. People are starting to talk about deportation, detainees, detention centres. And I think that all came to the forefront in 2017, where we had the Windrush scandal. And at that point, what happened was those people that came here legally, lawfully, were told that they no longer can stay here, that actually they don't have the paperwork to remain here, they do not have an indefinite leave to remain to be here, and they do not have legitimate passports to be here. And also the landing cards that they kind of had when they came here, which was to identify that they actually did land here and come here, they were destroyed. So all of this happened at that time, and you can imagine the great amount of stress that put people under. And Anthony Brown was one of those people that got caught in the crossfire. He was a person that was, came here, absolutely loved this country. His mum came here, he followed, he was here, loving it, working as a painter and decorator in Kensington and Chelsea. You can imagine the clients that he worked for, the lifestyle that he had. He loved his job. And then all of a sudden he gets a knock at the door. Bang, bang, bang. He gets pulled out of his house. He gets sent to a detention centre. And there he is. He's a number in a system that's just about to be deported. And the horrific nature in how he was treated has scarred him for life. When he was sent to Dorset to the detention centre, he didn't even know how he was going to get out of there. He would rather have left at that point than to stay here in that detention centre, where he saw people banging their heads against the wall, people shaking, people holding onto bars and slamming them. He saw it all, people screaming, shouting. There was just no support. And I think that has scarred him for life. And I think that a lot of people have been deported, a lot of people have lost their jobs, a lot of people have suffered immensely from mental health issues, and a lot of people have been left with absolutely no compensation for what has been an absolutely terrible mess up by the government. And when Wendy Williams did her report on the lessons learned and her review and her recommendations, none of those were taken into account. So actually there was no lessons learned from the report. There has not been any significant compensation for the number of people that have been affected. And in fact, those people that are still waiting for compensation are suffering from mental health issues. And the knock-on effect just goes on and on and on. And then also in the film, obviously, I show Paulette Wilson, who was also a friend of Anthony Bryan's, and how her life completely turned around and went just absolutely downhill because of this detention centre experience. You know, I've only filmed outside a detention centre and I felt the hostility. In fact, when I filmed Hostile, you know, we went to Heathrow, to the detention centre there, and immediately they come up to me and they were extremely hostile. They were telling me to leave. They didn't want me there. I had vans watching me, people watching me. I saw people inside, kind of at the window, trapped. I mean, the whole thing just felt so oppressive and just so controlling. And it was very heartbreaking to hear Anthony speak actually off camera about how people within these detention centres, how they're treated. You know, some of them are paid £1 a day to look after the facilities. So not only are you dehumanised, and not only are you treated so inhumanely, you are then asked to clean toilets for £1 a day. I mean, it's absolutely sickening. And I think that's how people are treated because of this hostile environment. And you know, when you see children being separated from their families, put into hotels and then disappearing, I mean, where is the humanity in this hostile environment? Where is the love for humanity? And I talk about that a lot, you know, on a higher level, we have humanity, we have each other. Forget about the borders, forget about the government, forget about our own cultural identity, forget about our language differences, forget about the colour of our skin, forget about whether we're male or female or whatever sexual orientation we have. We are all humans and we have this wonderful planet and we all have a place here. And I think we all need that place one day. We will all need it one day. We might all need it one day because of the global sort of climate crisis and the movement that's going to happen in the years to come. So I think, you know, it's heartbreaking to understand these stories and to see the real effects of the hostile environment. And I think Anthony Bryan was one of those stories that I felt deeply, deeply upset about because I've seen the real effects of his mental health, which have severely affected him during this time of filming and post-production and delivering the film. Anthony lost his mother, he lost his brother, and he lost his son. I think that's a lot to take when you've been subject to the hostile environment too.
Yeah, I mean, like, I really felt for him and Farouk, and like everyone in the film was like, you know, what they've been put through, it's totally unnecessary as well. Like, there's no need to have put these people through, and how much money it's cost them and everything. It's insane. Like, I'd really like to talk about Daksh's and Paresh's. You know, they run this food bank. I think we're short for time, but that was like, I really like that you tied that in there, and you know, you tied in poverty, and this, you know, there was Indian students that were using their service right because they had no way to live, they had no recourse to public funds. It was really terrible. Like, I really love that film. I think it's really good, and I hope like many more people can watch it because it just sums up the situation. And like I've said probably too many times now. I love how many different things you've weaved into the film, or the different things that you stitched in there. Just, I know because we're running short of time, I wondered, like, there was a part of the film that made me angry, and I've seen it before. Like, it's the clip of the Sky News presenter, and there's people crossing the channel, and the first question he asks these people that are in a boat crossing the channel, one of the busiest lanes in the world, is, "Where are you from?" It really pisses me off. Is this like, why is that your first question? Why don't you get them in your boats? That really wound me up.
Like, how can I help?
Yeah.
Where are you from? Instead of, how can I help? Are you okay? Do you need me? How can we support you? It's not, where are you from? And exactly, you think about that. And then you think about Brexit and the Brexit campaign. Similar, right? You understand why he said, where are you from? When you see posters telling people to go home and to take back control. The whole divide and rule, setting populations against each other, coming here via boats just for an easy life. When my mum walked for 16 days from one country to another, she never wanted to leave Lahore. She never wanted to leave her community. She would have been very happy staying there, thank you. And in a way, coming here was also part of that trauma, that transition. So when you speak to a lot of people that are coming here, and we talk to them in a way of, where are you from? Actually, they would probably say, I'm actually from my home, that I actually love, that I actually want to be there, be part of, but I cannot because my home is bombed, or I am fleeing persecution potentially, or I'm fleeing some kind of climate crisis. There is always a reason why people flee. And we mustn't think that they're just coming here because they just feel like this is the better life for them. Who would pass over those treacherous waters? My mom said to me, why on earth would I have walked? She walked. They had no food. They had to carry things on their back. She saw babies dying, people being shot, people being raped. It went on and on and on. I mean, it was just the whole trauma of that journey didn't leave her until she died, actually. She would talk about it until her death. And the trauma of crossing borders by water, by land, the trauma of leaving your country scars you for life, is all I can say. Whether you're coming here via a plane, via a boat, via any means, it scars you for life. So that's something that really, as a community of people, we need to think about how those people are, how they've been affected by this trauma.
What you said there about your mum's journey, I think she mentions it in the film, right? She says, she I think there's a moment in the film when she might say that she thinks about it all the time. She dreams about this girl that she saw, right? A young child, a woman dying that had a baby with her. Yeah, it's really harsh, But yeah, it's an amazing, absolutely brilliant film. I'll have links to it in the show notes for people to check out the trailer and stuff. I don't know if you've got much time, but can you tell us a little bit about the reaction to the film and maybe what you're planning to do next? Do you have any other films in the works?
I think, a film like this, it's a very difficult watch. I've been on tour for a while now, and sometimes, especially on the cinema tour where I was in the public domain quite a lot of people cried. A lot of people just, they couldn't handle it. They were crying. They'd come and see me afterwards. They'd be sobbing. A lot of people felt deep sense of regret, a deep sense of upset, and a deep sense of kind of helplessness in a way, like, oh my God, where have I been? On the other side, this deep sense of like, oh my goodness, this anger I have right now, I'm going to turn it into something positive. I'm going to get out this seat and I'm going to go and do something, right? So I've seen people break down, but people also rise up, right? And even the people that are breaking down are rising up in a way because they're being educated, because they're being informed, because they're being told something, they've learned something new about something they didn't know. So it's been really empowering for me in a way as the filmmaker to see those emotions and to see people that don't necessarily know about this subject matter then go out to do something, or to see people that don't necessarily agree with immigration to kind of think, actually, these are human lives. What is the cost of human lives? And then to see the action afterwards. You know, I've seen people do things because of the film, you know, and that's remarkable. That's the intention. So the reaction has been very positive in that way. And I think, you know, in terms of the reaction from the government, you know, I did do a screening at Parliament, which was incredible. And it was the day of the no confidence vote. So Parliament was full of MPs. There was a lot of hustle, a lot of bustle. And then up on the board, there's hostile. And we had a really good turnout in Parliament. So we had the Home Office turned up to that. And we had some Lords turn up to that, lots of different MPs. That was a really positive thing for me to have my film in the walls of Parliament. That meant a lot to me as the filmmaker. I felt it was necessary for that film to be bleeding through those walls, for those voices to be heard in that building was a very important thing for me.
Was that the no confidence vote in Johnson or Truss, or which no confidence vote was that one?
I think that was Johnson.
Okay.
That was the vote of no confidence for Johnson. And I guess that was a really positive thing for the film. And I guess the reaction, you know, from sort of obviously Labour MPs is one of like, how are we going to transform our policies in the future? And the reaction to the Conservative MPs, well, has been less so. I mean, I did send the film to Rishi Sunak. I do believe his office watched the film when he was the Chancellor. And I think that now he's now the leader of the Conservative government. I've been disappointed with his outlook on immigration and Suella Braverman's. I've almost thought, wow, it's got worse, you know, with now the police bill, the public order bill, the Nationality and Borders Act. I mean, it's like all of these things that it's kind of come into place since the film happened, and you kind of think, wow, how is this even happening? So that reaction hasn't been good. However, we do not have long for them to be in this position of power. And as much as it's going to take a hell of a lot of work to detangle and untangle the mess that's being created under this particular arrangement, I still feel that whoever is in power in the future, and let's hope it's not the current arrangement, has an opportunity to try and change things. Because my goodness, we do need that right now. So the reaction has been there. I think the biggest thing now for us is to really get the film out there as much as possible. We've had it in schools, in universities, in all sorts of organisations, within the NHS as well, grassroots organisations. I mean, we've literally gone UK-wide. And now we're going worldwide, right? So it's showing in Australia, showing in New Zealand, it's showing in Norway, it's showing in America, you know, showing here, showing in other places. So when your reaction stems past this hostile environment, that's where you know your work is being done, you know, to influence other governments, to say, actually, we don't want this. So I think, you know, as an independent film, which this was, as a film that was so under the radar that no one knew I was making it, and then a film that came out and then had a really good reaction, not only within the cinema, but also within like the BIFAs and the BAFTA. I mean, for me, it was like an incredible journey. And one I don't take for granted, actually. One I feel very grateful for, and one that I take huge responsibility for. And I think that's kind of the path I'm on now. It's like, how can we get hostile out as much as possible to reform and to transform the lives of human beings? And that's my agenda, full stop. In a positive way, has to be in a positive way.
And I really liked at the end of the film, there was a quote by Chomsky, which I loved. I don't know if you can see, but I've got a poster of him on the wall there. I don't know if you can see.
Love it. Love it.
But it reminds me of something that he says, and I've said it on this podcast probably too many times as well. It's like he said something like, if you act like nothing can change, then nothing will change. Which he's probably not the first person to say that kind of thing. But it's something I often think about. I feel like people can get really pessimistic about where we're headed and stuff. But yeah, I think your film was amazing, Sonita. How can, before we finish, I know you've got to go now, but how can people watch it? How can people follow you? Could you tell our listeners, where they can find more information about the film and this kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so you can watch the film on the BFI player. So it's there currently until July, and it's you can sign up for a 2-week free subscription, and then you can continue with the subscription if you like the BFI, which I'm sure you will. You can follow us at Hostile Doc on Instagram and Twitter, and you can also look at our website www.hostiledocumentary.com. I'm happy actually to stay on for 5 or 10 more minutes. If you'd like to ask me a couple more questions about the film, I'd be gladly happy to do that.
Oh yeah, Brill, that's good. Yeah. Oh yeah, why don't we talk about Daksha and Paresh's situation then? Because they were running a food bank, right? And they're fine to stay open. And how did the hostile environment affect them?
Yeah, I mean, I think firstly with Daksha and Paresh, they were my entry into Hostile. When I was learning about the film I wanted to make, actually I wasn't making a film called Hostile. I was making a film about how migrant communities were keeping our society moving during a global pandemic. So when the pandemic struck, I felt I needed to go out to the streets to understand what's happening within our communities. And so I was reading the Kilburn Times, and there was Daksha and Paresh. Here were two individuals from migrant communities who came here, in this sort of 70s and the 80s and embedded themselves in our society. And now they're running this terrific food bank, right? So I thought, right, they're two people that I need to speak to. They're two people keeping our society moving during the global pandemic. So really, Daksha and Paresh was the entry into my film. And that film was a very different film I was making. But when I met Daksha and Paresh and saw the work they were doing, they were the ones that introduced me to no recourse to public funds. They were the ones that kind of told me that a lot of the people that we're helping had no recourse to public funds. And that then led me on my journey. So as you said, they in the film had this food bank. It started primarily to help NHS workers, because at the time of the global pandemic, NHS workers were struggling. They were working so many hours, so many shifts, couldn't get a lunch break, couldn't get a hot meal, and they felt like they needed to help them. So they were delivering hot meals to hospitals all around North London. So they do this, and then they realise that, hang on, it's not just NHS workers, they need our help. We need to set up a food bank. And so they set up this food bank, and then they see the thousands of people a week are really needing their support. We literally got to thousands a week. People would come in, they would do deliveries, organisations would contact them and literally take hundreds of containers, people coming in and out. So this food bank was really a source for a lot of people in terms of their day-to-day food. And I kind of filmed them kind of going through their own hostility. Here's a food bank that's helping people that are suffering from the hostile environment. And at the same time, this food bank is being threatened because it cannot find a facility to continue to make food in. And they went everywhere. They went to the council, they went to local authorities, they went to support networks, and they couldn't get a facility to keep their kitchen going. So as I'm filming Hostile, and I'm filming this Hostile, and by the time I kind of continue filming with them, they introduce me to the students, and then the students kind of widen my mind about the hostile environment. I'm now making a film about the hostile environment. As I'm filming Hostile, they're facing their own hostility. So they're faced with closure. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what the hell? This food bank that's helping thousands of people a week is now forced with closure. And that's where you saw on the timeline of filming Farouk and Anthony and the students, we had the whole food bank closing down. During that whole filming period of 50 days, that is exactly what happened. That period over several months, I did a 50-day shoot over several months. It goes from being an open food bank to a closed food bank. So they went through their own trajectory of a hostile environment. And in a way that kind of shows where Daksha and Paresh, a lot of people that run food banks don't want them there. They feel that people should have the support, should be able to, self-sustain. There should be an infrastructure that's available to them to allow them to be able to buy foods and basic needs. But when that's closing down and you see the thousands of people that are suffering from the hostile environment then left, not only with no free school meals, but then their safety net, which was their daily food from Dakshin Parish, it was just a very heartbreaking thing to unfold, unravel and film. You saw at the end of the film, the reason why I'm kind of filming the flags coming down is because I think of empire. I think of this Great Britain, right, that's built on migrants, Great Britain that had post-war immigration to kind of build our country after a significant war, Great Britain that's all about inclusion and about diversity and creating that. And then I see these flags coming down and that food bank closing and thinking, how great is our Great Britain, really? How proud are we right now? I wasn't proud. I was actually really sick, disgusted. I felt awful for all of those people. And there were a lot of tears after that scene, I remember. There was a lot of cuddles and a lot of tears. And that scene killed us. And actually in the edit, it took me a long time to put that scene together. And the music, ding, ding, ding. It was like the emotion of putting that scene together for me. I was like, oh God, it was a lot, because I saw the aftermath as well off camera, how it actually affected them so much they actually left London because they thought, we can't be here anymore, because how can we be here where we actually in ourselves can't help, and they just couldn't cope with that. So they moved to Milton Keynes. So and I've continued to be in contact with them. You know, all of my participants I'm in contact with, and it's the same pattern with all of them. This feeling of just loss, this feeling of like we're not servicing, we're incapable, we are a number, we're lost, you know, we're on our own, you know, this kind of deep sense of like, and I think that is a really unfortunate and a really quite sad place to be when you've done so much, in the sense of what Dakshin Parish did, you know. And so yeah, I think it's been a very difficult time for them and continues to be so.
It was really sad. You know, there was a part of their story that affected me as well. Like when, like were you talking about the flags coming down? I noticed that. I noticed the flags up there, like in early on. But I think they're talking to a counsellor about the people that come in, and the counsellor says, "Well, you said it yourself. He said something like, if they're not eligible, then they're not eligible." And I just thought that's just like you said earlier, like they're just people that got to give them food at least. If they're not
entitled to it, they're not entitled to it. I mean, what does that even mean? You know, how can we even sit with the fact that a child who has an empty stomach is entitled? That child has a right to have food. I mean, that again, that whole scene, it was like, what is this? This is just local authorities on their knees, because again, they have been subject to their own hostile environment, where they are at breaking point. And I know that, and I saw that, and I've seen it, where their cuts have been over 50%. You know, again, let's take from the local authority, and the local authority should have so much more power. They are our local MPs, our local councillors. Those are the people that we meet. You know, governments to me shouldn't be sitting in this central seat of Westminster, who are so removed from day-to-day normal people's lives. Government should sit within our local authority, where the power should be, hey, let's have a town hall meeting and talk about the issues within our communities. Yeah, we have X number of people here living on the breadline. We have people here that have come in from X country that need our support. How are we going to set up a plan for them? We have people here living under means. How are we going to facilitate that? I don't know, rising fuel prices, cost of living crisis. All these things to me should be discussed on that local level. So when those local authorities are being crushed by central government, it's again going to affect everyday people. And again, I can't reason with that. And I'd like to see that narrative change in the future, where more power is given to local authorities to make decisions of whether somebody can have a meal, or can have a facility that can help them through a crisis, or can have funding to help them through a crisis. Because right now, they don't have decision-making power to make those decisions, nor do hospitals, nor do GPs, nor do organisations. They're all subject to the hostile environment because of the conditions that are placed upon them. You know, no, you can't have this operation because of this. No, you can't have this because of that. It's like all hostility that breeds throughout our entire narrative around this hostile environment. And it's really dangerous, extremely dangerous. So I'd like to see some transition with that and change in the future, if that's possible.
I hope so, yeah. And I completely agree with like the more power, you know, that comes bottom up rather than top down, the better, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So Sonita, it's been really great talking to you. Thanks so much for adding an extra couple 10 minutes. I hope you're not too late for your next meeting. I'll have links to everything in the show notes, and if people listening, we've mentioned a few politicians. I'll have links to who they are if the people don't know. Anyway, Sonita, thanks so much. Thanks for your time, and I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So nice talking to you today, and you know, big up Civil Fleet and all the work that you do, and thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks very much. Cheers. I'll see you later.
See you later.
Bye. Okay, that was episode 39 of the Civil Fleet podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks again to Sonita for coming on the podcast and talking to us about her film. You should really check it out if you can. I'll have notes in the show notes for how you can watch it, and I'll also put those up on Twitter and stuff, so you can find how to watch your film there. And you really should if you can. Thanks to everyone who's donated to the podcast, to anyone who's shared our stuff, to anyone who's appeared on the podcast, to anyone who's liked it. Thank you so much. I really enjoy doing this Civil Fleet, and I'm hoping to do more and more of it as time goes on, time permitting, you know. Okay, what do I normally talk about at the end here? Go check out the website, civilfleet.com. There's loads of stuff on there. I try to add as much stories on there as I can. You can also donate some money if you like. Go to ko-fi.com/civilfleet. That's ko-fi.com/civilfleet. If you can donate us a small amount of money, or loads if you like, that can help us to continue to make the podcast. It doesn't cost me very much, but I run this on my own in my spare time. I don't have any adverts or anything, so any help will be greatly appreciated. And also the last thing I'll ask you to do, which would be great if you can do it, is give us some reviews on iTunes and Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to the podcast. That kind of stuff always helps. Give us a 5-star review if you like. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's everything I need to say. So I should hopefully be having a couple more episodes out next month, hopefully 3. We'll see how that goes. Right. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.